with Amir Hassan and Nino at a seminar back in 2006-2007. And I thought, I want to meet this person who is behind this amazing material. And then I found Josh. And so Copenhagen DOX, thank you very much. And also, I want to thank Josh for these years of collaboration. When we met, I found out that he had lots more material than that. He had filmed with Adi and his family already. And he'd also filmed a lot of the material and then became The Act of Killing. So it was actually a mountain of hundreds of tapes. But that's a long story. Just I want to thank you for your amazing capacity for empathy and for your political understanding and for your clarity of vision. And I just want to say it's a privilege working with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Sina. The feeling is beyond mutual, and thank you to the Festival Copenhagen DOX. Thank you all for coming. I want to thank someone who can't be with us tonight, but whose friendship and bravery and integrity and gentleness has brought you this film. Adi Rukun. Adi is in Indonesia because tomorrow is the Indonesian premiere of this film. Some of you may know that The Act of Killing was brought out initially in secret in Indonesia. The National Human Rights Commission and the Jakarta Arts Council, both part of the government of Indonesia. National Human Rights Commission is part of the national government, the Jakarta Arts Council is part of the provincial government, are presenting the film publicly tomorrow in Indonesia's largest cinema in 2 back-to-back sold-out screenings. Adi will be presenting the film in Jakarta. That's a huge and humbling step for all of us on this journey. Adi was the one who inspired me to make both of these films, really, and who encouraged me to keep filming the perpetrators when, a decade ago, the survivors were threatened, and Adi's family was threatened by the army not to participate in the film. It was Adi who said, Joshua, try to film the perpetrators, see if they'll tell you what they did to our families. And when I did that, I found that they were boastful, and then everybody, all of the human rights community and the survivors community, said, keep filming the perpetrators because you're finding out what happened. But Adi had a deeper understanding and said, keep filming the perpetrators because anybody who sees the way they're speaking, who hears the way they're talking, will recognize that something is terribly, terribly wrong today. And in this sense, it was Adi who encouraged me to continue and to make these 2 films. I'm full of gratitude and full of love for Adi, for you, Adi, and for your whole family who took this journey with me. I want to also thank my anonymous Indonesian crew. These are dozens and dozens of wonderful people. You've been my second family over these years. These are people who gave up they're also in Indonesia for the premiere tomorrow. These are people who gave up, changed their careers, and gave up their family, their safety, took grave risks with their safety to make this film because they felt it was that important. One of them I've credited as a co-director, others, it was the whole family around this film. These are people who came to this project with such empathy and love and dedication. These are heads of NGOs, lawyers, filmmakers, university professors, environmentalists, human rights activists, and relatives of victims who made both of these films with me, giving years of their lives, knowing they couldn't take credit for their work until there's real political change in Indonesia. I'm so grateful. Terima kasih banyak kepada semuanya yang membantu. And then we have, there's one other person who's here who I won't call up, but I think he's here. But I certainly couldn't make this film without my beloved husband, Shusaku Harada. Are you here? Yeah, he's leaving from the back. I love you too.
Then we want to thank our co-producers on this film. It's Prenumerera film in Norway and Making Movies in Finland. And then we also, in all real effects, our Indonesian team, because they are also absolutely co-producers of this film. And then Spring Films in England. Thanks.
And then we have a lot of the filmmakers with us here tonight. I want to invite all of you up. There's quite a few names because there's quite a few of you in the audience. So please hold your applause till the end, just so that we can get all of you up here. We have the cinematographer, Lars Kreg. Come up when you hear your name. The editor of the film, Niels K. Andersen. The sound designer, Henrik Kugagano. Motion graphics, Emil Tol Bjørnsen. Tol's favor, who's the graphic designer. We have producers, associate producers, production managers, line producers, Anna Kunke, producer of the film, Maria Christensen, Heidi Elise Christensen. Also from Final Cut for Real, we have more producers, Monica Hellstrom, Gita Randlu, Clara Tufta, Anna Dahl. All of you come up, thank you so much.
To say thanks so much to all the financiers, the Danish Film Institute, the NIDA, Berta Bryddag Foundation, Freedom of Expression Institute in Norway, the Finnish Film Foundation, University of Westminster, Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK, the Sundance Institute, and all the broadcasters involved. It's ZDF Arte, DR in Denmark, NRK, YLE, VPRO, and Vision Machine Project, that was the place originally where it just started the whole thing in the UK. And we also really want to thank our international sales agent, Philippa Kowalski, who's also here today from Cinefilm. Thank you. And we have a few announcements, a little commercial. There's a screening with a debate on Tuesday in collaboration with the DOX, organized by Signe Plumbeck. There's a masterclass with Josh on the 12th at 2:20 at this cinema. And this film will be released in Danish cinemas on the 13th of November with Danish subtitles. So please spread the word. And after this Q&A that Mads from Copenhagen DOX will conduct now, there is a drink outside. So if you go out this way, please come back in and have a drink with us after the Q&A. Thank you.
Well, first off, congratulations on your first Danish screening of The Look of Silence, and thank you again for sharing your films with us. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has tons of questions for you, but as I said as the first thing, it's a film that we have been waiting to show for, well, I would say 2 years, and by that I didn't mean that I knew the film was coming. I assume that a lot of people that did see The Act of Killing and The Look of Silence is obviously a film that completely stands on its own as well and can be seen on its own terms. But I think for anyone who saw The Act of Killing and who was a witness to this very unusual should we say, concept of looking at a genocide from the perspective, a very surreal perspective of the perpetrators, would also be expecting, or to expect the viewpoint of the victims. But in The Look of Silence, I mean, the act of killing broke quite a few taboos of documentary filmmaking. But in my view, The Look of Silence, in a way, is, to some aspects, as I wouldn't say controversial, but as boundary pushing. And I'm talking about the idea that, which is really a grand taboo of documentary, that the filmmaker is actually confronting the participants, and in this case in the company of Adi, of course. And to begin with, I was wondering if you could let us in on how you planned these confrontations, because it is indeed a very subtle and a fine balance.
Well, I was filming with Adi's family and with Adi in 2003, 2004, when the army threatened them not to participate anymore in the project. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we then started to film the perpetrators really at Adi's insistence. And Adi would watch over the 8 years that we filmed with the perpetrators everything we had time to show him. And as a close friend of mine, we went on a kind of journey together as he would watch that footage. It was affecting his life, it was affecting the way he saw his children's future, it was affecting the way he was doing his work. Somewhere midway along that journey, maybe in 2007, I found out that he was when he was testing people's eyes, which is what he does every day as an optometrist, when he was testing people's eyes and meeting anybody over 60, he would ask them, as you saw in one of the early scenes in the film, what they remember about 1965, and he would meet with a variety of responses. He would meet typically what you saw in the film, people saying you shouldn't look into this. He would also meet perpetrators, he would meet survivors. And after, when we returned to Indonesia in 2012 to film The Look of Silence, I went back to film The Look of Silence. We went back, because you were with me. We went back to film The Look of Silence after editing The Act of Killing, but before releasing it, because I knew once we released The Act of Killing, I couldn't safely return. So this was this window of opportunity to make this other film. I knew ever since January 2004, when I filmed the 2 men going down to the river, that I would make 2 films. That was the inspiration for the whole project. I had this feeling. What was unique about that day was not the boasting, and it was not the reenactment. It was somehow the sense that these 2 men were reading from a shared script. That I brought 2 men together from neighboring villages to see essentially how would they talk to each other about this. Would they talk to each other the same way they speak to me? And I had this feeling that they were reading from a shared script, and that the boasting was something collective. Something that did something in that society, that performed a role. And that was utterly chilling to me, because I had this feeling then that I wandered into Germany 40 years after the Holocaust only to find the Nazis still in power. I felt this was this enormous story of impunity, and I knew then I would give as many years of my life as it would take to address this. And I knew that I would make 2 films, both about today, neither about 1965. One about what happens when killers win and they tell stories to justify their actions, a film about denial and storytelling and escapism and fantasy. That would have to be a flamboyant film. That was The Act of Killing. And I knew I would make another film about what does it do to ordinary human beings and to a family to have to live for half a century in silence and in fear, surrounded by the people who killed your relatives. That's also a film about today, and that's of course The Look of Silence. Anyways, when I returned to make The Look of Silence in 2012, I didn't know that Adi would necessarily be the main character, but I knew I would start the discussion with him. And when we started talking, immediately he said, what I want to do is meet the perpetrators. To which I basically said absolutely not, because I couldn't think of a way of doing it safely. I'd never seen a film where survivors confront perpetrators while perpetrators are still in power. In fact, I don't think there's ever been a documentary where survivors confront perpetrators while the perpetrators are still in power. There's been fantastic, important work by my friend Rithi Pan, where survivors confront perpetrators, but there the perpetrators are at least partially out of power and can no longer boast about what they've done. So I felt this was a crazy idea and an unprecedented idea, but then he explained to me why he wanted to do this. And forgive me, I'll go on tell you a little story, making the long answer even longer. But he showed me a clip, or he reminded me of a clip that he shot a couple years earlier. I'd given him a camera so that he could look for images in his family that he felt embodied somehow the essence of his family's experience. And there's one image that he brought me that he said was the most, he couldn't talk about the image without crying. And it's the only image that he shot that's in the film, and it's the very final scene of the father crawling around the house, lost. That was at the end of Ramadan in the Eid al-Fitr holiday. Adi was home with his family, I wasn't there, and his father was confused and demented, suffering from dementia and having an attack of dementia all day. And Adi was trying to comfort his father and was unable to do so. And finally he said tearfully that the most loving thing he could do in that moment was to simply bear witness to what his father was going through. And I said, what does it mean to you, this image? And he said, well, my father has forgotten the horrible events that have really destroyed his life and broken my family. But he's not forgotten the fear. And so because he's forgotten the event but not the fear, he can't talk it through. He'll never be able to work this through. He'll never be able to heal. It's too late for that. He's trapped in this prison of fear. And I don't want my family to be trapped in that same prison of fear going forward. And that's why I want to confront the perpetrators. And I said, well, how will that help? And he said, well, I think if they meet me, they will acknowledge what they did was wrong, because they'll see that they've killed a human being by meeting my humanity. And then, having done that, I'll be able to separate the crime from the human being, because they're no longer celebrating what they've done, they're acknowledging it was wrong, and I'll be able to forgive the human being. And if I can do that, then we can maybe, as he says in the film, start to live side by side as human beings instead of as perpetrator and survivor divided by mutual suspicion and fear. When I heard this, I had a feeling that I should think, is there any way we can do this safely? And we realized with Lars Clay's advice that if we shot the scenes very carefully, we would bring a getaway car so that it would be hard for them to follow us. When we left, Adi would bring no ID, so that if we were detained, they wouldn't be able to figure out who he was by the time we got help from our embassies. I would shoot only with a Danish crew, so Sina would record sound, and Clay would be behind the camera. If we did these things and if we shot the scenes in rapid succession, quickly, then maybe we could get away with this. And I think the real reason we were able to get away with this was because all of the perpetrators knew about the act of killing. They knew about its production. They'd known that I'd been working with the most powerful people and powerful perpetrators in the province, the governor, the police chief, the vice president of the country, the head of the paramilitary organization, but they hadn't seen the film. The film hadn't come out. And so I realized before they would call their thugs, who were always goons and gangsters who were always standing by to attack if ordered, before they would call them to attack us, they would have to think 2 or 3 times, because they think, Joshua is perhaps close with my superiors. So we had this very unique situation which allowed us to do something very unique in documentary film. And I suppose that's the answer to how those came about and how a little bit of
Now with The Look of Silence, you mentioned that a 10-year project has come into its conclusion, or at least where something new can perhaps begin. For me, I think in The Look of Silence I had an even stronger impression of the passing of historical time in the film. Even if the act of killing was actually 7 years in the making as well, especially in the scenes with Adi's parents, which are frankly heartbreaking to bear witness to. You really feel that this is almost like that this would be the last chance to get the testimonials and the witnesses' own words. But in the making of the films, did you ever feel this burden of sort of that this may be the last chance to document this genocide, which I mean in our part of the world has not been that well known until your films, like this burden of the history that would...
Yeah, I think I really did. I think I felt that all the time from that time 10 years ago when I described when I was down at the river with those two men and they were having this wonderful afternoon out and I was having the worst afternoon of my life. I had this feeling after that I had to film every perpetrator I could find across the region. I knew that these men were growing old and nobody had ever documented the killings in North Sumatra at all, and no one had ever documented, virtually nobody had ever spoken to the perpetrators in Indonesia in any systematic way. And I felt that when these men would die, the stories of what happened would disappear, and when Adi's family as Adi's parents would get old and they seemed to reach an ever more impossible age, as they would die, the chance to understand what this does to a life is also lost. So there was a period actually in the middle of shooting The Act of Killing where we went and took out some weeks to film with Adi's family, afraid that the parents were not going to make it. And none of that material is in the film. The only thing that's in the film came out of that was Adi having a camera and filming his father.